Hi guys, it's me Azai and welcome back to another video. In this video, we are going to be talking about the Wiccan triple deities. Now mind you, I said deities, not deity, that being mainly for the most part the triple goddess. We are going to be discussing also the topic on the triple god, but that is something that I'm going to get a little bit later. I'm going to get a little bit into later. And yeah, this video is a continuation of a video that I had made previously titled the Wiccan Deities, which you can watch up there. And you don't really need to watch that one in order to understand this one. However, I highly do suggest that you do watch that one in order to have a better understanding of everything that I am saying here. And yeah, I would also like to give a disclaimer that this is essentially my understanding and interpretation of the triple goddess and the triple god. That being said, not everybody is going to agree with everything that I am saying, and that's completely fine. And in terms of the triple god, this is something that I am still learning about. I am still exploring it. There's not really like a bunch of information compared to the triple goddess out there. So I am essentially working with what I have. And yeah, I am essentially talking about it because I want to provide you guys with the fact that, you know, this is something that people do work with and some people acknowledge. And yeah, essentially that's like pretty much the reason why I'm adding the triple god into the topic. And I think that would be all for like the intro, but anyways, without further ado, let's begin. So the triple goddess, or at least the Wiccan goddess, is essentially recognized as having three aspects that essentially mirror not only the moon phases, that being the new or the waxing moon, but also the full moon and the waning moon, and the life cycles of a woman, which would be the maiden, mother, and crone. The maiden would mirror the new and the waxing moon. The full moon would be the mother, and the waning moon would be the crone. Now, the Trinity also represents our life cycle, right? Which would be life, death, and rebirth. And this is something that is seen within the phases of the moon. You see how the moon essentially goes through this life cycle of, you know, it having a life, right? So it's like this life cycle of being born, living, and then dying to then come back again to being reborn and back again. Now, some people view the goddess as having three aspects of herself, which would be a trinity, right? It's literally the same goddess, but having three different aspects of herself. Now, I also learned that triad and trinity isn't really the same. I thought that they were, but I learned better now. And I learned that a triad is essentially three different goddesses that mirror their specific life stage within the maiden, mother, and crone triad. So for example, you could say the Roman goddess Diana would be the maiden, the Egyptian goddess Isis would be the mother, and the Celtic goddess Caradwyn or the Greek goddess Hecate would be the crone. To start, we're going to be talking about the maiden. So the maiden not only is known as such, although that is her common name, she's also known as the huntress or the virgin goddess. She is represented by the new or the waxing crescent moon, because, you know, the new moon, because essentially it is, you know, the moon where it, you know, it has a clean slate, right? It has to do with new beginnings, new opportunities. And now when it comes to the waxing crescent moon, well, that is essentially the phase that is in its growth phase, pardon the redundancy, it's in its growth phase towards fullness. Going back to her being called the virgin goddess, so I had said in my Wicca 101 video, all you need to know about Wicca video, that when she is called the virgin goddess, we are not necessarily, well, not for the most part, we're not referring to like physical virginity for the most part, because let's be realistic. The whole thing about being a virgin, this is all just a social construct. I even wrote notes about it because I kind of wanted to talk about it. So essentially, I believe that this virgin BS was essentially made in order to determine a woman's value or their worth. And whether you have a penis, a vagina, it like nothing changes after sex. Literally, it's just a new experience. It's just like swimming. You don't know how to swim, you do it, you practice, you get better. That's literally what sex is, honestly. You know, oops, you know, learn something new. Probably maybe thinking, oh, the hymen, like, are you saying like the hymen breaking? Like, what are you talking about? Like, the hymen really isn't like a social construct. So here's the tea. So the hymen is essentially a thin piece of tissue that can stretch, tear, and even break. According to the people whom I have in my life that have a vagina, it can do all that pretty easy. Or by accident, oops, because you were running, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about that later. But anyway, so whether it breaks, stretch, or tears, I think it really depends on the types of hymen that you have, which I learned that there's actually many types of hymens, little did I know. So the hymen can break pretty easy. So it can either, like I said, break, stretch, or tear when you're riding a bike. It can happen when you're using a tampon or a menstrual cup. It can also happen when you're doing gymnastics. It can happen when you're horseback riding. And the most famous one of all in the Latino community, if you hit the area really hard, trust that something will happen, and it's most likely than not you're gonna bleed. And so for the most part, a penis, it's not a magic wand that like, no, that we need to get that shit out of our heads. When we are talking about the goddess being a virgin, what we mean is that she is innocent, young, creative. She is curious, right? Above all, of course, she is responsible for all of her actions. You know, when she is titled as a huntress, basically means that she is linked with a woman's more wild nature. Essentially, that means that she's free, independent, she is courageous, brave, and resilient, you know? And as the huntress, she is essentially the one that cares for her creatures and is also seen accompanied by them. To some, she is the goddess of spring. You know, spring has to do with new beginnings and increase, and this is something that pretty much is seen within the changing of the seasons. You know, it goes from the dark winter to the bright spring. Now, when it comes to the mother is also known as the queen, but for the most part, people only use the mother. Now, she is represented as the full moon because that is the strongest phase, and it is essentially when magic is more potent, right? And as the mother, essentially, it means that she's reached adulthood and is recognized by her nurturing, protective, motherly love qualities. She's a confident adult, a mother. She is also a partner. You know, to some, she's the goddess of summer, you know, because that is when the earth is flourishing with life. She is the goddess of manifestation, completion, fulfillment, fertility, motherhood, birth, and way more. When I say birth, I don't necessarily mean like actual birth, like bringing a child. You know, it's essentially birthing anything from ideas to new plans to new projects, anything that essentially is going to come to you. She is the mother of all. She is the mother of love, most importantly self-love, and she teaches us to love her through loving ourselves. To me, this means a lot because if you have been struggling with your image and all of that, I think that when you realize that she wants you to love yourself, because by loving yourself and working with yourself, you are essentially creating a connection with her. When you realize that, at least this is my experience, it became a lot more easier to appreciate myself for who I am and who I am becoming, rather than having that image of everything that I lack, that I want, that other people have. You know, if you have this issue of you know, comparing yourself to others and all of that, honestly, like, to me, like, acknowledging or at least learning, right, the fact that she wants us to love ourselves, you know, like, when you love yourself, you love her. We are an extension of her. When you realize that, I feel like the way that you see things, or everything, I guess you could say, it really does change, and you start to appreciate everything for what it is. And when you start to do that, you start to appreciate the little things in life as a whole, and you start to see the bigger picture rather than focusing on stupid things like, oh, I don't know, my hair type is wow, you know, yeah, my hair is, you know, it's a whole experience. Sometimes I hate detangling my hair, but it doesn't mean that I actually hate it, you know, like I did in the past. Anyway, so now we're gonna go to the Crone. So the Crone is also known as the Dark Mother. She is known as the Elder Goddess or the Wise Woman. Of course, she's known as the Witch, the Hag, or whatever it may be, but for the most part, the Crone is like the name that she is most known by. She is represented by the dark or the waning crescent moon. Now, mind you, how I said dark now and I didn't mention it earlier. Now, the reason being is because for the most part, I've noticed that not a lot of people associate the dark moon with the Crone goddess. And there's also the fact that a lot of people use the new moon and the dark moon very synonymously, honestly, interchangeably. And for the most part, the dark moon is a moon phase that I don't really work with, so I do not know too much of it, but she is associated, the Crone, with the dark moon. But for the most part, it's the waning crescent moon. So it would be the opposite of the waxing moon, right? Now, to some, she's the goddess of autumn and winter. You know, those are the times when there is a high amount of decrease, you know, decay, stillness, and symbolically death. You know, she is the goddess of acceptance, of culmination, of compassion, prophecy, transformation, of magic, guidance, of healing, wisdom, you know, which technically she is the source of it, right? And way more as well. She is the gatekeeper of death with the promise of rebirth. She teaches us essentially that without death, there is not going to be a rebirth. It's all a cycle. And also she teaches us spiritual completion. And to finish with the Crone, she is that which cuts what no longer serves us. So she allows us to pretty much release, banish, and let go, which is what you will want to do when there is a waning crescent moon, right? And now for the triple god. So some people recognize the god as having three aspects as well. Now contracts to the goddess who mirrors the phases of the moon and a woman's life stages. The god essentially is recognized as mirroring the cycle that the sun goes throughout the day and within the wheel of the year. And also the life stages of a man, that being the youth, the father, and the sage. Of course, there are other names that are used instead of those, but I'm gonna get into this a little bit later. Now, the triple god is not only linked with the everlasting cycle of nature, but also the life cycle, or the cycles of life, death, and rebirth. And this is something that is seen not only within the sun solar cycle, but also within the wheel of the year. This is something that I explained a little bit in my Wiccan Deities video, which I highly suggest that you watch again. And yeah, about the sun solar cycle, I'm gonna touch about it a little bit later. So with that being said, let's start with the youth. So the youth is also known as the hunter, although sometimes he is known as the warrior instead of the hunter, and the divine child. And he's represented by the dawn or the sun up solar cycle. Now, as the youth hunter, he embodies essentially all quests. So whether they be physical, spiritual, artistic, scientific, social, learning, self-discovery, pretty much he is the aspect of searching and seeking, right? You know, he is the untamed hunter who essentially roams freely throughout the woods, you know, and although he is the hunter, he is also the hunted. He is the sun that literally gives us hope for the months to come. Link this with the dark winter and, you know, or Yule, how when we celebrate Yule, we are celebrating, or we are encouraging the sun to pretty much go up and give us the hope that it's essentially going to be giving us throughout the months to come. Essentially, literally link this, you know, the divine child as the sun is, you know, being reborn, essentially with that. You know, he is essentially the one who teaches us about birth, about being birthed. And within the wheel of the year, we acknowledge the youth, the hunter or warrior, and the divine child in Yule, which is essentially when he is either born or reborn, and throughout Imbolc and Ostara, which is the spring equinox, right? So he is reborn in Yule, and then he essentially grows throughout Imbolc and the spring equinox. Now, as the father, he is also known as the warrior, although sometimes he is the hunter or the king instead of the warrior. He is also known as the lover or the consort and the protector. And as the father, he is represented by the noon or midday solar cycle. And as the father, he basically is a teacher, a lover, a consort. He is also a protector, not only of the goddess, but also of their children, essentially us. You know, he is the god that's full of love. He's full of tenderness. He's full of compassion, passion, and vitality. He rules over power and logic. He is the strong rays of the sun at its peak of power. He essentially teaches us about the wonders that life has to offer. And within the wheel of the year, he is present in Beltane or Letha, which is the summer solstice. Now, when it comes to the sage, also known as the king or the sorcerer, but again, the sage, he is represented by dusk or the sundown solar cycle. And as the sage, he is the one of wise knowledge. He is a guide and a mentor. He is the one that teaches us about death. Through him, he is the comforter and consoler of hearts after a loss. And he teaches us that without death, there is no rebirth, right? And within the wheel of the year, he is present within the three harvests, which are Lunasa, or Lunasa, however you pronounce it, which is also known as Lammas, Mabon, or Mabon, which is also known as Autumn Equinox, and he dies in Samhain, or Samhain, how I used to call it. Now, as I said earlier, the triple god isn't really like something that is very well known or talked about within Wicca. I do not know necessarily why, but yeah, it's not something that a lot of people know about. It's something that not a lot of people incorporate in their own practice. I have been, like I said, learning and exploring, you know, this new territory for me. And honestly, all that I can say that I've gotten like positive things out of it. I've been exploring with, you know, masculine energy and all of that. And honestly, I can say that I've seen good results. If you want to be more familiar with what masculine energy is, I think exploring, you know, the triple god would be like really beneficial for a lot of people. In this case, for you, right? It has been for me. So I mean, you know, I've seen results, right? And yes, I think that would be all for tonight, technically. But before I say my outro, I would like to start like a little bit of a discussion. If you lasted this long, if you have, thank you, I love you. So for the discussion, do you think that the triple goddess has a bigger importance within Wicca than the triple god or the god? Do you think that the triple goddess is more important than the triple god? If so, then why? And also, how would you be incorporating the triple goddess and or the triple god into your practice? I would totally love to see or read, should I say, you guys' opinion and start a discussion. That would be very lovely. And yeah, without further ado, I'm gonna end this. So if you guys like the video, be sure to leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe. And I shall see you guys later.
Made me feel so much better.